Hello and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. I'm your host, Josh Abrams. The Eagles lost, that's right. First meaningful loss in a while puts the Birds at 1-1, and the Phillies are starting the most important 11-game stretch this season. We have all that and much more after this quick intro.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
And we are back, and as usual, I have an amazing panel of guests with me today to talk some Eagles. I have Sam Brown, Tyler Smalls, and the man whose opinion matters none at all, Dave Roberts. Guys, it was kind of rough. The Eagles suffered their first meaningful loss in, let's say 6, 7, maybe 8 months. First meaningful loss since the Seattle game last year, 27-21. Very heartbreaking loss in one way or another to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have all of a sudden found fire with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And, guys, I'm going to leave the floor open to you guys. What is everyone's take from Sunday's loss?
Well, in the moment, this loss was kind of a punch in the gut, but it's something they can come back from because they got two very good pieces of news over this week, and hopefully they'll be able to use the positive energy they get from this news to muster up a win against the Colts this week.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a lot to really be taken negatively away from this game. I think it is more of a big win for the Buccaneers and not so much of a big loss for the Eagles. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Jackson has just been a lights-out combination. But the secondary could have been better in this game, but now with Carson Wentz returning, huge news for the Eagles.
Yeah, off of what Tyler said, it's not, you take some negatives away, but it's not a huge negative. It's the first reaction I have is just annoyed, I was just annoyed that what we can do as a team, but we just didn't do it. It was just hard to watch, but we know we can pick it up next week, but off bat it was just very annoying.
Yeah, and Tyler, I'm glad you brought up that point, more of a mental aspect, talking about this is only week 2, right? And you look back at last year in 2017, we started off 1-1, and look what happened from there. So obviously it's a small sample size and anything can happen, but there were a lot of positives, a lot of negatives. You look at the stats. Ryan Fitzpatrick had another 400-yard game. He tore our defense apart. The first play of the game, he finds our former teammate, former Eagle Deshaun Jackson. Looking at the Eagles stats now, the defense. As poorly as they played, Ronald Darby did have a good game with 8 tackles. And while Nick Foles did have 330-plus yards, he had to complete the ball 35 times and throw it almost 50 times. So, just looking at how the Eagles played specifically, what side of the ball do you guys need to see improvement from in order to feel more comfortable?
I think the offense needs to wake up a little bit more, like you said. I think Jalen Mills having gotten burned on that first play of the game from Deshaun Jackson really was kind of, like I said, punch to the gut. But if the offense wakes up earlier in the first half, I think that it'd be beneficial to them to explode early, which is what they need to be doing.
Tyler, how do you feel necessarily? I know you said, we kind of all have a general consensus that it's more of a bigger win for Tampa Bay than a bigger loss for us. But what are you pointing at specifically that the side that needs to step up?
I'm honestly more concerned about the offense in this because they really are missing a lot of pieces now with Jay Ajayi possibility for week 3. The receivers, I felt there really are no big names. There's nobody really catching balls besides Ertz and Aguilar, but their leading receiver is their tight end, which is never good for an offense. So I really think that the Eagles should actually look into signing some of these free agents, like, for example, Dez Bryant, someone that terrorized these Eagles for years now in the NFC East. But it is definitely going to help once again with Wentz coming back, but he needs some weapons around him if he's going to be as effective as he can be.
I know everyone said offense. I'm going to flip it. I got to say defense, honestly, because it's just the fact that you know, we saw what they could do last week against the Falcons, like 2 goal line stops, and you know, like that gives us a lot of confidence coming into the season because, you know, we all know defense wins championships, and like if you see that and you kind of want to see that for the rest of the year, and then for them to have a 75-yard play on the first play of the game, that's
that was rough.
That's that hurts. So I think for me, I need like consistent defense. I need everyone to play as consistent as possible. I know Jalen Mills is one of those players that is very inconsistent. He can have a good game or he can have a really bad game. So for me, just as a defense as a whole, not any individual player, I feel like they all need to step it up and just be more consistent than what they have been.
Yeah, we definitely need to see more of a collaborative team effort from the Eagles. But let's get into some of the more recent news this week. We got banged up pretty good with injuries recently. I know Jason Peters has been having his troubles, but you know, 2 huge components of this offense that I don't think a lot of people were talking about, especially with Mike Wallace. Him going down has led to the signing of a former, very familiar Eagle, Jordan Matthews, and he's going to be suiting up on Sunday, which is perfect because obviously Carson's coming back. Generally, how do you guys feel about getting good old J-Matt back?
I'm very satisfied with how Bears been bringing back Jordan Matthews. In Wentz's rookie year, you know, they had that very good chemistry, and I think that reinstating that chemistry to an offense that needs to be picked up will be only good for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, he led the team in targets in 2016. We knew that he wasn't going to be a WR1, and then the next season we went out and got Alshon.
Yeah. I think he's going to be a great addition as well. It's just another one of the weapons that he needs around him to try and increase those throwing yards, because even though it is Nick Foles compared to Carson Wentz, Nick Foles only had about 418 yards in his first 2 weeks. So that's just not something you should be getting out of your starting quarterback. So it half goes with an MVP caliber quarterback dropping to his secondary, and it also goes with who's catching the ball around him.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous in the fact that we know it's Carson's first game back, and it's also Jordan Matthews' first game back as an Eagle. And I mean, he knows the system, but like it's just the fact of like you kind of just throw him in there, just tell him like, all right, you have to know these reps, all these plays, and it's very quick. So hopefully, I mean, I have faith that we can get it all together and get it working. I expect to see at least one really good catch from Jordan Matthews for us to be like, oh, like that's what we're used to seeing.
Yeah,
but like I also expect like one play where we're like, why did we sign him? So like, it's very 50-50.
I'm expecting J-Matt to have the consistent, you know, like 70 catches, 900 yards, 6 touchdowns, that whole deal. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, though, personally, I think one of the bigger reasons why we struggled offensively on Sunday against the Buccaneers was because of the lack of production from our tight end core. You know, we saw Josh Perkins, number 83. I had no clue who he was. The guy on the very left, Dallas Goedert, hasn't seen many snaps this week, or really this season so far. Again, small sample size where it's an early and young season, but you know, what gives, guys? Why are we getting these numbers, Dave?
Honestly, I blame us being a championship team. I feel like because we know once you win a championship, all the other 30-something teams are just all like eyes on you. Like, all right, who are we like gonna stop so they don't do this again next year? So I feel like we know Zach Ertz is Mr. Reliable. We all love Zach Ertz in this city, and I feel like the whole league realized that. So, and there's a certain plays you saw on Sunday where he went out there and you saw 2 guys on him like as soon as he got off the ball. So, like it's not. I mean, we won a championship, and of course I'm happy about that. But now we know. Like I feel like we should be known that like all right, like they know who they're gonna come after, and we should like game plan for that.
And I also think that the Eagles need to stay a couple steps ahead of every other team in the league in preparing for defenses that are going to be looking to shut them down, given that they are the champions. I think it'd be better for Dallas Goedert to play some more snaps and get that experience in. So because he's jumping right into a team that's fresh off a Super Bowl win, so he's getting firsthand experience about what it's like to play on a team of champions and play against teams that step their game up when they're playing against you. So having Dallas Goedert play more snaps will be good for him.
And it's just giving more experience to the young guy, having him learn around these veterans who now have been on a championship team. But I also think it comes back to, once again, Nick Foles not really being able to make those big passes past the first down mark. He's usually going for those 10 to 15-yard passes where tight ends make their money. That's where they live. So
Right.
he really hasn't. They've been able to cover in those cover 2 zones very shallow because they're not worried about him going deep past the safeties.
Yeah, well, we're certainly hoping for a bounce back on all aspects of this weekend. And let's get into it. Let's talk about the Colts. They have not been good since 2015. And they made it to the AFC Championship game. But they're the one player on that team that you must keep an eye on at all times is T.Y. Hilton. Arguably, I mean, you could argue top 5 receiver in the league. He's been tearing it up in Indianapolis for a couple years. We talked about how shaky our secondary is, giving up those 2 huge plays against Tampa Bay. What do you guys see happening this weekend in terms of how we're going to contain T.Y.?
I think that the defense, aside from the secondary, needs to step up their game and help out the secondary so that they have an easier time taking away chances for T.Y. Hilton to receive passes from Andrew Luck, who you can't underestimate Andrew Luck. He's an excellent quarterback coming off an injury, so he's hungry. So if they can get more pressure on Andrew Luck, it kind of takes some of the burden off the secondary shoulders to hold down T.Y. Hilton.
And then I'm just going to move ahead just because I want to talk about someone else other than T.Y. Hilton. Is there anyone on the Colts defense that we have to worry about? I mean, we talked about last week Tampa Bay's D-line was a familiar one and one that had to be looked at a little bit. But, Dave, go ahead.
I feel like it's the offensive line's job for them to not have anyone be a name at all. Because I feel like the line is I'm a little, because of Jason Peters, I'm a little shaky about what's actually going to happen. I feel like whoever they put on him is Vite. He could have a good game because he's an iffy player. But our goal is for them not to have a big name do anything on defense at all.
All right, real quick before we end Eagles talk, let's get into our picks. Some of us weren't feeling as optimistic last week, but this week it's a clean sweep of Eagles winning this week. I have them in a close game simply because of how shaky they were last week. Sam, you have them 29-10 with Carson being the MVP. I would love to see him get off to a hot start. Tyler, you have 24-13, relatively close, and Corey Clement being your MVP. And Dave, 21-17, close as well, and our boy J-Matt coming back.
Come back, do something. Who knows?
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens. Before we going into this game, how much of it is it really a must-win when you look at just the expectations and the media on us?
It's a must-win in terms of you would hope that they cleaned up the mistakes that they made in Tampa Bay last week and that they worked on these things in terms of their secondary. It'd be great for Carson Wentz to win a game coming back from an injury, a debilitating injury that generally takes, about a calendar year to recover from, and he's back a couple months earlier than that.
Yeah.
So it would just be great for them to win in terms of national media and just to give the fans that sense of hope that they had. Going into the season.
Would you guys say this is a game? This is our game to lose?
I think so.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Definitely I think it's just going to be a very shaky game whenever the Eagles have the ball because there are a lot of new assets coming into it. They're not really going to know the offense 100% well, and with Wentz being a little shaky coming off the DL, plus the Indianapolis defense is nothing to write home about, as you said, so both sides of the ball will be a little shaky there, but it's just going to come down to the defense of the Eagles really making a mark on this game.
Yeah, certainly hoping for a clean Eagles victory, nothing to worry about after this week. But we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the pinstripes. Don't go anywhere. welcome back from the commercial break. Dave followed in the footsteps of former Bears cornerback
Vontae Davis.
Vontae Davis, and he retired, so he's no longer with us on the show. But anyway, we're going to get into Phillies talk. They, as I said earlier, are in arguably the most important 11-game stretch of the season. 7 of those games include games with the Braves, and then in between that is a series out in Colorado. Looking at it right now, we pretty big win last night, winning a series. That feels pretty good, right? What are your thoughts heading into this stretch?
So I think what they did over the weekend is significant and insignificant at the same time. It's significant in the sense that it's their first series win over the weekend since early August
Over a
or
month.
end of
Yes.
July, early August. But it was against 2 teams that they should be beating anyway, in the Marlins, who've just been terrible since pretty much in my whole lifetime, except for maybe 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
And the Mets, who for some reason have been beating the Phillies in games that the Phillies should be winning.
Yep.
The Mets, they're not that special, and I don't understand why the Phillies have been losing to them all this time. Like, what was it that was causing them?
I would say the combination of the Mets pitching staff and their shaky offense that can get hot at times was able to beat our inconsistent hitting and pitching. But Tyler, go ahead.
No, you're 100% right. It's good. We went 4-2 in the last 6 games, but there are 2 series against the 2 worst teams in the NL East. That's, if we want to make a serious playoff push, those are 2 sweeps that we have to have. Because the Braves went 2-4 in that same exact stretch, so it is a little bit of us catching up, but those are games we have to win, especially because they were playing the Cardinals and Nationals.
And you simply saying that are already more critical on them than Gabe Kapler. but we'll get into that later. Something that's been bothering us as fans this whole season is how horrible. We talk about the offense and the pitching and the bullpen and all that stuff. But we didn't get to really talk about the defense last week, and that's something that I want to get into on the show today. We're 11 games away from ending the season, as I've mentioned, and we have arguably, stat-wise, the second most errors in the MLB. I mean, this is just absolutely horrendous. I understand that the team's young, and there are little things like Kapler moving the lineup around that doesn't help, but there's just no excuses for it.
Yeah, errors add up, and the sooner that the Phillies understand this, then the sooner they'll be able to clean up on defense. The old saying that defense wins championships absolutely applies here, and the Phillies won't even make the playoffs if they keep playing defensively the way they are.
No, you're 100% right again. And I think it's more of a point that they are putting in people in this lineup, putting them in the defense that are just better hitters, that are just known for their offense. Like the Carlos Santanas, Bryce Hopkins aren't really defensive studs. They're not gold glovers out there. So, and also just moving them around to try and make the lineup work better, putting them in positions that they're really not comfortable with, it's going to add up to those second most errors in the league.
Yeah, and speaking of gold glove caliber, who I think is Michael Franco. Now, he's had his struggles at third, but he has made some really nice plays. Some absolutely stellar diving plays. There was the one throw, and I forget what game it was, but he was, he threw literally across his body and threw a dime to Carlos Santana at first. It was beautiful, but he's been actually. I didn't want to talk about him as a struggle, but what have you guys seen from him defensively at third base? We know his offensive potential, but.
I mean, aside from the great plays that you mentioned, there are just some really bad mental mistakes that he's made at third base. There was that one play, it probably actually was a foul ball, but the umpire did end up calling it fair, and he just threw the ball into the crowd as a souvenir, thinking that it was a foul ball. So even though he may have gotten the play right in his head, he's got to listen to what's going on. He's got to pay attention to what's going on around him, and that's something that contributes to a player making errors that they shouldn't be making.
Is Michael Franco someone you want at third base for a long-term Phillies future, Tyler?
That's just honestly depending on if we could sign anyone bigger.
And we'll get into that later. But
and we will. But again, he would be anyone that's, if he were to be replaced, I don't think anyone would really bat an eye. He does have the best fielding percentage on the team, as you said, but they're really could be someone more mentally sound there because mental errors don't show up in the box score. So I think he, in a league where third base studs are just known across the league with all the Nolan Arenados and the once Manny Machados, it's just somebody that you need. It's a trademark that you need for each team.
Yeah, and again, going back to this whole 11-game stretch thing, a lot of people coming into the season weren't expecting us to be really paying much attention to these last couple of weeks, but we are, and we're here. And while the deficit is still, it's still pretty big. Is it 5.5 now? I think it's still at 5.5 or 6.
5, yeah.
So
5.5 out of the division.
Essentially, we got to go 6-1 at the worst to beat the Braves. So looking at these next 7 games, we got 4 on the road, and then the last 3 are at home. How do you guys feel about the matchups with the Braves, especially this late in the season?
Well, now's the time for for some specific pitchers, Pivetta and Velasquez, to either step up or shut up, because Velasquez hasn't pitched past the 6th inning since August 3rd.
That's right.
So,
forgot about that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just been rough seeing him with. It's him and Pivetta have such great movement on their pitches, but once the one little thing can trigger it, and whether if it's like a 2-out walk, it's just really bad.
So
Yeah, he's been responsible for 3 losses just in this month. And honestly, if he is getting out of these games so early, you would like to have a bullpen that you're comfortable putting in earlier in games or in the game in general. And that's also something that the Phillies haven't had. We really haven't had a consistency in this bullpen.
And going on to the bullpen, I'm personally not comfortable using the bullpen all the time, and I need these starters, or they need these starters to be going deep into games to relieve the duties of the bullpen. So if those pitchers can, put together some wins and even just pitch until they're eligible for the win, then that'll really help this team.
All right. Yeah. So, I guess real quick before we move on, the level of confidence in these last 11 games for me is not very high because of the quality of the teams. Looking at the schedule, how confident are you guys that we can actually make this thing happen?
The Braves are coming off a 2-4 stretch, like Tyler said, so this is something that they need to take advantage of right now. They need to take at least 3 of 4 from Atlanta, and the Rockies are red hot at this time, even though they're a couple games out of their division, but it's going to be a tall task playing the Rockies in Colorado.
But it is good that the Colorado Rockies are coming off that sweep against the Dodgers. But honestly, for 11 games September, I've seen crazier things happen in baseball. Whether or not I have a lot of confidence in it, I think it's very possible. Baseball is a weird game, and
True.
You could see anything happen for this October stretch.
Yeah, good point. We're going to move on. We got to get over to Fast 5. And Sam, I'm going to come to you first with a Flyers question. The young guys have been looking really good in the preseason, putting up a lot of points. Who's your breakout youngster this year?
I got to go with Oscar Lindblom for right now. We saw some life from him in the middle of end of last season, and it's definitely carried over to the preseason now. So I expect to see big things from him.
Yeah, we need to see that production move up for the Flyers. Tyler, the Sixers signed Elton Brand, former player, as the GM. How excited are you, and how good of a move do you think this is?
About as excited as I could be for somebody that knows little to nothing about Elton Brand. I don't think anyone really does that is a 76ers fan. 1999 #1 pick.
Yep.
Really didn't have that great of a career or anything to write home about. So I think it more comes down to the work that the starting 5 is putting in the offseason. I saw something about Fultz putting up an insane amount of shots. Is obviously trying to fix that jump shot. Same with Ben Simmons to try and expand his range. So
yeah, I think it'll work out.
We can only hope.
We'll see what happens though.
Yeah.
Sam, Eagles question: how many sacks do you need to see from this D line to feel comfortable?
I'd like to see at least 4. Breaking through that O-line of the Colts, I'm not sure how good or bad that O-line is, but Andrew Luck is someone that they need to get to.
Tyler, we got a Phillies question for you. What's your take on the Phillies struggle? Who do you blame the most? Who do you point to?
Easily the starting rotation for the Phillies. If you look at some of the numbers, Jake Arrieta, somebody we expected a lot out of with this signing, 6.49 ERA in the last month with a 1-1 record. Same with Eflin as a 5.46, Velasquez 6.75, Pivetta 4.68, all in the last month in this stretch where we need to win games and need consistency from these starters. And even our ace, Aaron Nola, 3.29, which is nothing that you really would like, number-wise.
Yeah, I think you're the whole 1 month, last month thing is definitely a big part of it. And then last but not least, Sam, hot off season for the Phillies. What free agent are you looking for us to get?
If they could bring in Bryce Harper, that'd be great for everyone on the team because Rhys Hoskins' natural position is first base. What they do with Santana is up in the air, but if they can have Harper to bolster that outfield, I'd be very happy to see that.
All right, well, it was a pleasure to have you guys on. Thank you for coming on to talk. We enjoy you guys tuning in and watching us. You can catch us on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, lasalle.edu/LaSalleTV. And we hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Go Birds. We're hoping for a bounce-back win to go 2-1. And everyone have a great weekend.